Well, we have made it. We've made it to the end of the EdCollab gathering. Um, the EdCollab gatherings have always been online. They have always been our gift to the education community here from the EdCollab. They've always been a way that we have hoped to have our global community of literacy educators everywhere learn from one another and connect and share. But I don't know, there's just something about today and right now that felt, for me, particularly needed and necessary. And I saw some of that coming up in tweets today. So thank you for being a part of it. Seeing as you now know me in my pajamas and here shoved in the corner of my apartment, we're friends now, so we probably have already been friends. But one thing I can share is, and I tweeted this earlier, just as the day was getting started, I had already turned off my camera with you. You were on to the incredible opening keynote we had this morning with Disrupt Text. But I started crying. The tears were coming down. But what I recognized was that those tears were different than the ones I've been having these last many weeks. And for some of you in other parts of the world, it's been the last many months. The tears were hopeful. When I've allowed myself to cry at times, when this has all felt overwhelming and it's hard to process, it's been hopeless tears. I'm certain of that, because I felt something different this morning. And I wish that gift for all of you. I hope you've had it at times. Maybe today was a part of that, like it was for me. Maybe it was something else. But if you haven't had those hopeful tears yet, I hope I can let you know that they can come too, because that's what happened to me. Just thinking about what all of you have done to put on today, and so actually, as I'm rambling, should lead to some thank yous you can get on with. The reason why you're here to see the keynote, but as I think about what all of you have done to be a part of today, and how you have worked in many ways to make this day special and important, I just felt so much hope. Like there's a next step that we can take. And when it's all of you taking that next step in the ways that we take it together, I feel hopeful. So just some thank yous first for today specifically. So thank you to all of our presenters who made time to record themselves within their busy lives and schedules that were happening, and submitting proposals way back when and working with tech team volunteers in order to put that up. Thank you for sharing all of your joy today with us, your expertise, just everything you did today brought so much joy to so many. I have to look back up to say thank you to everyone who stopped in today. So I'll grab that in a second here. I just don't want to forget. Okay, there it is. I also want to have a very special thank you, and I hope you join me in this, in thanking the tech team. So the tech team are volunteers. They are all educators who have full busy lives with every other thing that they're doing. And they have given their time to help make sure that today goes the absolute best that it possibly can. And so the tech team has been heroically, especially in this quick new way of figuring out how we do things today, have heroically been led by Carolyn, Jessica, and Amy Kaiser is humble and doesn't have her bio and face up here, but she's our administrative assistant and was a huge help on this as well too. So thank you, Amy, as well. This team of women make this day possible. Carolyn, Jessica, Amy, you're going to make me cry again. I cannot thank you enough for all that you do to lead us with care and heart and grace and problem solving and brilliance. Thank you. Our tech team always changes. People are able to volunteer one Saturday and then a different time they don't, and then they come back another time. So we always see a new family. But for today, please, please, please join me in thanking these incredible people who have given their times amidst everything else that they've done, including Claire, who also today and was a tech team member. On the top of our webpage, if you go on to, I think it's information here, I'm going to look right now. If you go into About, there is a link to All-Star Tech Team. You'll be taken to a page that has everyone's names and bios. Most importantly, and please join me in this, also has everyone's Twitter handles, every single person. And so we've likely already tweeted them out. A big thank you as well too. But please, please go to that page, send a thanks to anyone or to all of them. If you were a presenter, you can thank them again. Just let them know if it wasn't for tech team members, today wouldn't happen. Also a reminder, if you felt joy at any point today, which I certainly did to the point of actual tears, please at some point today, if you can, or soon, you might visit us at the charity link on our website that will take you to both descriptions of the charities that our two keynotes, our opening and closing keynotes, have adopted, as well as links to those charities pages. From there, you can make a direct donation of any size, but take what you would have paid to join today, a conference like this, and pay that joy forward. As I said this morning, if you have a different charity, something that's helping your local community right now as you and the people around you are living inside of this pandemic, or if there's other charities that you want to give to, pay the joy forward there. And it doesn't have to be monetary either. There may be ways that you can volunteer either with a charity or just find a way to share your gifts with others. Anything you can do to take the joy you felt today will be very meaningful to us here at the EdCollab. So thank you for that. Also, before we go, you can now, if you'd like to, after, well, not now, after Tiffany's keynote, you can click over to pre-session if you haven't seen it yet. If you're interested in other ways that you can learn with the Educator Collaborative, that's the place where I describe all the things that we're doing right now to support you as you're virtually learning. These are things that we are happy to support you with, and I have lots of disclaimers and other things that I say there, including, like I said this morning, none of this is normal. None of this is true distance learning. None of this is true teaching and learning. This is an emergency situation that we're trying to hold each other as carefully as we can inside of. But we think there's ways we can be in conversation with you and help with that. So please feel free to go there to learn more about us and some ways that you can learn with us. Some are for free, some are for fee. The for fee is so that we can celebrate and support the expertise that the members of our community have and to help them as well during this time. Along with learning, two announcements to make that aren't so great, but they're understandable, and then two announcements to make that are exciting and wonderful. So first, the not as great news. So two things are going to be postponed for us in 2020 due to everything that's going on right now, due to the pandemic. Those are the Global Kind Project. So the Global Kind Project will stay live, but it will not be updated for 2020. Instead, that will just stay as it was in 2019. It's still live. All of the resources are there. And if there's anything that you'd like to pull from the work that we've done there to use with your class in May, you certainly can. You also could sign up if you haven't before. There's some automated emails that walk you through 4 different weeks. It's right on our main website, theeducatorcollaborative.com, and there you will find links to the Global Kind Project, and you can use our resources. We're not updating it because our family is in this with you. And so all of our members are struggling with life and everything else. We also recognize that you as educators have your plates full up to here with free stuff. So thank you for joining us today, but that's going to be postponed. Another thing that will be postponed until not this school year, but the next school year is our associates program. I know, I'm so sorry. I can hear some of you that have emailed and asked and said, when are the applications coming? It doesn't mean the program is gone. Instead, what we've decided to do, and we've already let them know, is our current cohort of associates have had a big chunk of their year now chopped off, and we don't know what's going to happen as fall starts up again. We all may be going back to school as normal. Maybe only some of us will, maybe none of us will. We don't know what fall will bring. So the current associate cohort will continue with us into the next year, anyone that would like to. Then a year from now is when, all things willing, this positive energy, we will announce that we'll be accepting new applications for the new cohort. It just felt like the right thing to do, to continue with this family that was disrupted. And then a year from now, we hope to invite you back. So sorry for that for everyone, but it just felt like it was the right thing to do. So that was the not so great news. Now the really great news, drum roll please. Our fall gathering, our gatherings always happen every September and April. Our fall gathering is taking place on September 19th with our opening keynote, Sadia Faruqi. We are so excited. Sadia is the author of many middle grade books, early readers, as well as an adult novel. Here are a bunch of her Yasmin series that are incredible. As Sadia has said, Yasmin is, while the publisher likes to say is like maybe second, third, maybe fourth grade-ish, although I would even say first grade could probably read it too. It's certainly something that everyone can read and learn from. Yasmin is a spunky girl who does incredible things. The series is beautiful. This is just 3 of the many. We are just so delighted that Sadia will be joining us to be our opening keynote on that day. I'm going to put back up her information. We would love for you to join us in tweeting her saying, yay, we're so excited to see you. And please mark your calendars for September 19th. And that includes you. This day is made up of educators from around the world who volunteer their time to be part of the tech team or who lead sessions. The incredible sessions that you saw today could be you too. Proposals are open right now. If you haven't refreshed your page in a while, refresh the page and then look at the top. There's a proposal link. You can just click on that. You'll be taken to proposals. The proposals are open through June 1st. On that page, you'll see proposals for both sessions. So if you'd like to present a session on September 19th with Sadia as our amazing keynote, you're welcome to do that. You also could fill out an application to be a tech team member. We are so dependent on our tech team and your gifts and your ability to help make this day possible. So if you're interested in that at all, please submit an application, or you can tweet any of those people from the about us, and then click on tech team and you can tweet them directly and ask them about the experience. So just some final thoughts before we move to our closing keynote, and I give you a brief introduction there as well. I think one thing we have to do is we have to trust and know and believe, even against maybe any faith that you may or may not have in your heart right now, that things will improve and change. I think we have to know right now that we can chart a new course. And I think we have to know right now that that new course can't be the same course. That new course can't be the way it used to be. That new course has to grow and learn both within our classrooms and within our schools and within our society. I know it's hard to take in what's happening right now. I find it impossible too. I just cried this morning, as I told you. But we can't be too numb to it to not learn from it. One very quick way that you can start charting a course is actually quite simple because it involves the gathering right here. And I want to suggest this to you. Think about the sessions that you saw today. Think about both the lessons that they gave you, but more importantly, think about the choices you made of who you saw today. Why did you pick who you picked? Were they people you heard before? Were they topics that you were interested in? Who made up your roster of sessions that you wanted to listen to? And perhaps a way that you can begin to chart a course, a personal course even, is to go back through and see, are there sessions you maybe never would have listened to or weren't your first choice? Because perhaps it was a topic you didn't know that you'd want to learn anything about. Or maybe it's a presenter whose name you didn't recognize. And so you thought, well, I'll go to this other person instead. Or maybe there was a grade level that didn't matter to you, wasn't really in your purview, so you didn't really want to watch it. Um, these aren't necessarily bad decisions that you made. You're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe so-and-so's presenting. I want to hear from them. Or this topic is amazing. But what I want to suggest is that one of the ways that we have to chart this new course is by opening doors that we haven't opened before, by going to people and places and ideas that we haven't. And to especially my fellow white educator friends, there's many times where that means that we are not going to Black, Indigenous, and other people of color for our learning. And so for us, that might be work we need to do. And again, I'm not talking to all of you individually. Maybe some of you charted your course that way today. But as you reflect, if you think, oh, wow, I saw a lot of the faces I normally see, the EdClab gathering is now recorded for posterity and will be up on our site until our next one on September 19th. So I invite you, as a way to chart a new course, is to see who could I learn from? What could I learn from? What ideas could I gather that perhaps I hadn't before? And then that could be just one of many ways you open doors that perhaps you haven't before. So without further ado, I want to introduce, and then we're going to do that switch we did this morning of, I'll ask you to then go back to the website and refresh so you can actually watch her keynote. But we are so honored to have as our bookend to today, Tiffany Jewell joining us. If we were on screen together, we could be talking right now, as well as talking about our children and everything else that we often are messaging each other about. But hi, Tiffany. Tiffany Jewell is the author of this incredible book, which again, the publisher says is like young adult, middle grady. It's actually for everyone, adults included. This book is Anti-Racist is a beautifully, I mean, just incredible. You likely have a copy already, but if you don't, just look at these illustrations. Incredibly designed by Aurelia Durand. Just beautiful, amazing, page after page is stunning to look at. And then all of Tiffany's words are clear, crisp, hard. They don't hold back, doable, practical. It's maybe written for a young adult audience, but it's really written for us too. This book is Anti-Racist is an absolute guide that can support you, students, family members in thinking about your place in our society, the ways that you are actively anti-racist or not. Oops, Yasmin fell down, and ways that you can develop your biased anti-racist lens in a really powerful way. So thank you, Tiffany, for this book. And now if you'll join me, I just right now am hitting update on our webpage. I see the little thing scrolling. In just a moment, here we go. I'm going to clear the page. Okay, so any second now, you should be able to refresh your closing page and you'll see Tiffany's keynote below. Thank you for all that you do for your colleagues, for your community, for your family, for yourself, for your students, for this amazing profession, and for being with us today. Thank you all. Enjoy Tiffany's keynote, and we hope to see you soon.
Hi. So this is different. I'm really excited to be here and be the closing keynote for the EdClab gathering. It's such an honor. And it's so like am in awe with all of the other workshops and folks who are a part of this. So feeling really honored right now, and just gonna dive in. Recording, you might hear my children doing their thing in the background. Maybe not, I don't know. So thank you for being here. And I'm titling this closing keynote, waking up, taking action, doing the work, growing into my anti-racist self. And I've like toiled with the structure of it, and I've decided to just I think you're just going to be listening to a bunch of rambles that get put together in the end. The title also, this is like me looking for stuff. And now also you get to see like my shameless or shameful pitches for my book, but also like the title comes from my book too. So yeah, first I'm going to take a sip of my tea too. So before we get started, I just want to take a moment to take a deep breath. And really, I like to start things with honoring, doing a land acknowledgement. And I know that's like not enough too, right? So I'm sharing this work with you right now while I reside on the traditional unceded lands of the Pecumtuck and the Nipmuc. I'm in Western Massachusetts. And it's really important for me in my daily life to pause and notice whose land I'm on and why I'm here right now on this land, through colonization and through centuries of policies and procedures and laws that are incredibly unjust. Right now, I'm thinking deeply about the Wampanoag who are out in eastern Massachusetts, and the Bureau for Indian Affairs just took their land away very recently. So please look that up and use your voice to fight for the Wampanoag. I feel very connected. I've worked with an organization called Montessori for Social Justice and have had the great pleasure of learning more about Indigenous language schools. And there's an Indigenous language Montessori school on the Wampanoag land, and thinking a lot about language and people and culture, and how easily that gets erased and stripped away just by crappy procedures and policies and laws at the whim of the government and people in charge who have an extraordinary amount of resources to do that. So with that being said, like, know whose land you're on and what can you do. This is like questions. What can you do to not just honor that land, but to amplify the voices of the people who the land belongs to? And so just thinking about that, I know that there are some webinars and calls to action with the Wampanoag, and I'm going to be sharing some resources on how to connect when I get them on social media, and hopefully you will take that into consideration too. So just kind of pausing, honoring that land, because I wouldn't be here if I wouldn't be here on this land if things were done differently, and I'm okay with that. Meaning, like, if I weren't here. Anyway, also kind of going along with that, though, wanting to also honor the Onondagas, who are part of the Haudenosaunee Iroquois Nation. And I grew up in Syracuse, New York, and I'm going to be talking a lot about my time growing up in Syracuse in a couple of minutes. But also, it was on that land, the Onondaga's land, and then later in the Cayugas, when I went to college, where I got to grow into myself, and acknowledging that that land was very provided for me in what I needed to grow. And I just took and take. And so now it's my turn to give back. Okay. With that being said, we're going to keep talking, and I'm going to keep sipping my tea. Sorry, I'm really thirsty. So some of the other things, just a little bit about me and who I am. My name is Tiffany Jewell. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I identify as a Black, biracial, cisgender woman. And that, like, those parts of my identity are with me all the time. They're parts I think about. I am a trained lower elementary Montessori teacher, so that lower elementary, first, second, third grade. And I've been working in Montessori schools for 15 years, and this is my 18th year teaching. And I've always worked with younger students. This is my first year getting some solid footing with middle schoolers. I am also now in this new role at our school, director of curriculum instruction. So I'm getting to like do some exciting things around curriculum. I am a first generation American. I am a mama to two amazing young people. One is 8 and one is 4, just about 4, really, really soon. And I also am the author. I am the author of this book. This book is Anti-Racist. It's my first book for young folks. It's not going to be my last. And if you've read it, please let me know. And if you haven't, please do. Wink, wink. And I am also a co-founder of a social media book club, Anti-Racist Book Club, with my friend Britt Hawthorne. And it's been really fun, and we're bringing it back really soon. So stay tuned. I'm excited for our read during this social distancing time. Bonkers that we're in this time. So I'm not really sure like when I figured this out, but I've been thinking a lot about it very recently, and how pretty much everything I learned about racism, I learned in school. And now is since my schooling, now is when I'm like figuring it all out and doing this big work of analyzing it and taking action. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what my schooling was like, my experiences as a Black biracial kid who grew up in a single parent house with a immigrant parent and working class poor, white. My mom's white. So like all those things kind of inform me, like who I am today. So a little bit about my school. I went to, I'm going to focusing primarily on elementary school, and then that leads into some other things. But my elementary school was in the city of Syracuse, New York, which is in central New York. And I've not been able, so I've been looking at statistics, right? And we know, like, I went down this rabbit hole of looking at statistics, and we know that statistics are just like, they just kind of whittle us down into parts of a whole. Like we're into these like percentage points and everything. And the numbers are there and they give us some information. And I'm also like, it's not that easy right now, and just through like internet research really, to find the statistics from decades ago, because I went to school decades ago in the 80s, and But when I look at the numbers now, and from what my memory is, and looking at statistics of the city during the time I was there, I think the numbers are pretty similar to kind of like student population and other things. So my old elementary school was within walking distance. It was 2 or 3 blocks from where I lived, also from like the neighborhood, like my mom and my family like grew up 1 block over. So it's also the elementary school that my mom and my aunt and uncles went to. So it was like the only school that we all really knew as an elementary school. So just by numbers, and I'm not going to throw out all the numbers because they are overwhelming to me. And this isn't like, I want to do some other things too, but I also think it's really important to paint a picture for you. So just sharing a little bit, the average, like looking at averages. So in New York State, about almost $33,000 gets spent per student in each school, while in my old district right now, it's 20,000. So it's a big difference from the state average and the average in the city. About 93% of kids in my old elementary school are eligible for free lunch. And so like thinking about the neighborhood and what that says about the neighborhood that school is in. While in the city, it's about 75%, and in the state, its average is about 51%. And then we look at like students, and I'm going on racial identity. So a lot of just about everything I do, I use the lens of anti-racism to understand the world around me. And so some folks do say like, Tiffany, you talk about race all the time, and I do. And it helps me to understand the world, and I think it helps the folks around me to understand the world too. So looking at students in the state of New York, the average of schools in white students is 43%, and in my old school it was 13%. The majority of students in my old school, the predominant race of students is Black, and that's 71%. Yet they're still labeled as minority, which I find incredibly problematic. I don't use the term minorities to describe folks of the global majority. That's the term I use, because it's it's not empowering. And it's oppressive language that we don't need to be using. So I like to, when we're talking about race too, and if I can be as specific as possible, I'm going to say like Black, Latinx, biracial. So using those terms. And I always prefer when in conversation to use those terms instead of kind of blanketing, like instead of saying people of the global majority or people of color when you mean Black. The other statistics, so I want to focus on the Black student population, and it was about the same when I was a student, maybe even a little bit higher. And also looking at my old elementary school is ranked out of 4,239 schools in New York State, it's ranked 4,218. Is way at the bottom in the percentage of proficiency for state tests. In math is 5%, while the state average is 50%. And in reading language arts is 7%, while the state average is 47%. And my the big question that comes to mind when I think of all those numbers, and I also looking at, so 71% of the students are Black, and 95% of the teaching population in Syracuse is white. And that hasn't changed. I did not have any Black or brown teachers in elementary school. All of my teachers, except for my 6th grade teacher, were white women, but they were all white. And all of my specials, they're white. So my big question is how, like looking at numbers, breaking kids down into like parts of a whole, which I do not like to do, but I think it's really important, is how does anti-Blackness inform the actions that led to those numbers. And so thinking of anti-Blackness and growing into my anti-racist self, and pro-Black and brown folks. And when I say brown, I'm including like Latinx, Asian, Native American, Indigenous, including all marginalized, minoritized people, folks of the global majority, because the world is more Black and brown people than white. So schooling is where I learned about anti-Blackness, especially like, look at me, I'm a very light Black biracial person. And I also like when I was in school, like my white mom dropped me off every day and my white grandmother picked me up. So how did the school see me? What was my experience? I loved school. And school, like when I reflect on it, it wasn't amazing. I'm just gonna share my screen and share a picture of me when I was in elementary school with you, because why not? So that's me in 4th grade. And I pretty much look like that all the time. And I still, I feel like I look the same now too. So I loved school, I loved learning, but there were some experiences that were really, really hard. And I'm just going to share them with you right now. So school was where I learned a lot of things. School is where I learned that Black and brown bodies could and should, air quotes here, be managed by white ideas, policies, and people. Our white teachers told us when we could go to the bathroom, who we should sit next to, how we should walk down the hallway, whether we could talk, whether we could play on the playground or not. I remember in 3rd grade is where it all went down too. 3rd grade is where I fell out of love with my teachers. But I remember in 3rd grade, I had a very overtly racist teacher. And if you read my book, you'll learn a little bit more about her. And legally, I cannot say her name. So for all of you who are wondering, there's a teacher like this in every school, just about. So I remember the kid who sat kitty corner from me. Our desks were in 4. We were a group of 4. One of my best friends was sitting across from me. There's a kid sitting kitty corner, and then there was somebody else next to me. And I remember this kid raising their hand, "Can I go to the bathroom?" The teacher being like, "No." Doing it a couple more times, and our teacher repeatedly denied this 9-year-old the ability to go to the bathroom. So this student had an accident in the middle of the day. And instead of having empathy and recognizing her mistake, our teacher chose to ridicule him. And that was not okay. And that was something that was just like a normal occurrence in our classroom. And we were supposed to go into that classroom space and feel safe and learn from her every day when we couldn't even go to the bathroom. I ended up like being one of those kids who like never even asked to go to the bathroom because I was afraid, right? Like I wouldn't drink water, I would get headaches. I was afraid to drink water and nourish myself for fear of having an accident and being ridiculed. That shouldn't have happened. School was where I learned that my light skin and my white mom gave me a lot more access, and that I had more potential and I was more worthy than other students who were darker than me. My best friends, my classmates, I had a lot more access. And I didn't realize this at the time because I was a kid. And this is my reflections. But in 6th grade, I was really pushed by some of my teachers to go into the gifted and talented program. And that was my first time experiencing being in an experience in a schooling situation where majority of the kids were white. It was really different and really unsettling. And we were bused. My sister and a couple others of us were bused away from our school. So what message was that sending us? Like, you're better than the other kids. You deserve a different place. You get to sit on couches and eat whenever you need to. No teachers are going to manage you here. So this was set up by my school system. So do you see what I mean when I say everything I learned about race, I learned about school, about racism? So the school was just setting us up for these things. And as a kid, I was aware and I was like looking and I was noticing these things, but I did not have the language to describe it. And there were some incidents. So there was one, school was where I learned that white adults could inflict harm on Black students and that it was normal and okay. My third grade teacher, the same person, called my best friend something really horrible. And I'm not going to repeat it here, but we had to sit in her classroom every day for the rest of the school year, knowing that she could just say whatever she wanted and make us feel so small. A white woman who couldn't even spell the word Asia correctly. And we told our parents, but nothing happened. And that was kind of, like I said, third grade was when I fell out of love with my teachers, when I stopped trusting them and I started questioning a system. Questioning a system. My mom like called me contrary because I was constantly questioning things. I stopped saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I would sit down, I wouldn't do it. I would turn kind of writing assignments, any assignment I could, into a way for me to question a system. And it changed over time. But I remember, I think it was fifth or sixth grade, like writing this poem, and I still like remember the beginning of it. It was about like Christopher Columbus. Like, what did you do? Like, you thought you were doing one thing. It was just basically calling out why we study Christopher Columbus, and my teacher did not like it. But because my grammar was fine and I followed the rules, I still got a good grade on it. But that was like my little form of protest. So I was like becoming awake. I was waking up and taking action in a small way, but I didn't have the tools to talk about it, and I didn't have the tools to kind of analyze what was happening and understanding why I was needing to take action. I was just kind of reacting to things. I also like remember from my youngest years to even like being older, hearing other parents, other white parents saying to my white mom, wow, you keep those girls so neat and clean. And that told me, like, what do you think that told me as a kid? It told me I couldn't take care of myself, that I needed a white person to ensure that I looked presentable and that I was like assimilated into the dominant culture, that other kids who didn't have the same, like a white mom or the same level of assimilated appearance weren't okay. So again, like that's like language too. Waking up, just like always feeling my body grow tense from those conversations, those things that people said. School was also where I learned how to erase people, how I learned to erase languages, cultures, homes. It's where I learned, and this is not just me, this is what we're telling our students in our schools all the time. It's where I learned that some stories were more important than other stories, that the voice of a few could be invisibilized. The words of a few could invisibilize a whole many people. And learning the history of our own city in Syracuse, our own state, we learned about the Onondaga people as a thing of the past, not knowing that just like down the road, Oren Lyons could have popped in anytime to talk to us. I didn't know what anti-racism was when I was a kid growing up, but I did know I did have this feeling growing into my anti-racist self, and it was always kind of like, um, my body got tense and I needed to question things. And anti-racism looks different for everybody. It's also looked different for me throughout my life. And there were also, so I'm talking about anti-racism, and I love how like Ibram X. Kendi talks about how you can be both racist and anti-racist. It's not like a black-white binary thing, you know, like I'm not anti-racist all the time, because it's so easy to fall into the trappings of racism and white supremacy culture, so much easier than it is to resist. You know, I think of even when we kind of our schools shut down for because of the coronavirus, right? And how quickly we march into urgency and perfectionism, and we need to have everything tied up in a little bow, and we don't give time and space for healing. And this happens like across the country and across the world, and it's so easy to fall into those. And it takes a lot to be anti racist. It takes a lot to be anti-sexist, anti-homophobic. Like it's a constant state of waking up. And Dr. Barbara J. Lev, in her Developing a Liberatory Consciousness, she reminds us that we are constantly waking up. And once you are awake, it's hard to go back into that like very unawake state, but it is easy to fall into these other traps. So I'm now, like I told you a little bit about school and where I learned about racism, and there's some other stories that, like, when I reflect on them, I'm like, did that really happen? And I even texted my sister and my mom to be like, was this real? Okay, so when we were in high school, we had these agenda books. They were like little day planners where we had to write everything. We had 20 passes a month that we could use, and sometimes you had to use more. I don't love passes. I don't like managing kids' bodies. I don't think that's okay. But we had those, and they had these labels on them that had our name, maybe our homeroom number, I think our date of birth, and then there were all these other little labels next to our names. And so there was W, O, and B, I think. Can you guess what those meant? So B, black, O, other, W, white. And throughout my kind of like growing up, I've labeled myself differently. I've labeled myself mixed, multiracial, biracial, black. I've never called myself white, but my school called me white and my sister white, because I think, and I don't know because we never got an explanation, but I think it was to fill quotas because we had a white mom. And my white mom also never labeled us white. She was one of the only people who was willing to tell us that we were black. And so this kind of came out, it was in the news. There's not a lot, like I couldn't find a lot online, but I did, like a friend sent me an old article that was written. And so that was happening. Like our school was like labeling us by race and making it like a very, it was very binary, right? So like who gets to be other, who gets to be white, who gets to be black. And then me coming to terms like, oh, I got to be in track one, the upper track, which got to go on field trips and had the beautiful classrooms because the school saw me as white. So that's a lot of like unpacking I've been doing for my whole life. But what does taking action look like? Then it was speaking up, calling news stations, writing things for the newspapers, and demanding that our schools stop labeling us, working really in solidarity with a bunch of other students at our school. When I was in elementary school, it was me resisting, not standing during the Pledge of Allegiance, right? Taking all those writing assignments. But then there was middle school, right? Middle school was a time when I couldn't resist. I didn't feel like I could. And I tried so hard to assimilate and fit in with people around me. And there was a lot of white folks around me for the first time. It was when I first straightened my hair, and inflicted pain on myself to look a certain way. It's when I loved the show My So-Called Life, and so I started trying to adopt like the mannerisms and the fashion of the white girls in that show. Um, and high school was when I got to kind of reclaim a little bit of myself again. And but that looked more like saviorism, where I worked with different groups. Like I was super involved. I was a mediator because I wanted to create a peaceful school, and I worked with our school, a club, to raise money by selling things so we could help build schools and things in other communities that were really that needed them. Not seeing with my own eyes that my own school community, that the community I was living with, needed my support and me to be there fully for them. And I think as a teacher, how do we foster this activism in our students? How do we allow for time and space to be created for them so they can grow into their anti-racist selves and have these like missteps and grow from them and keep growing? And I don't have a total solution, and that would actually just be like us talking for days on end, because our student populations are different in different parts of the country and different parts of the world. But for me, it really looks like it starts with the truth. And the more truthful I can be and honest with my students, and the more I can share with them, then they will be able to grow into their own anti-racist selves. And to continue on, it looks different all the time. So in college, um, I I've shared this story many times too, but I had for my freshman seminar, I had a class called Failure and Success in America, and we read books like Pudd'nhead Wilson. I think that was Mark Twain. I don't remember now. It was not a good book. We read and we watched movies, and we were assigned to read the autobiography of Malcolm X. But my teacher, a white woman, had the class vote and decide if they were going to read that book, which is like this thick, or watch Thelma and Louise, which is on like every Sunday in the 90s, right? So, and I was the only person of color in that class, the only Black biracial person, and the class like outvoted. So an act of resistance for me was reading Malcolm X anyway, and then reporting back to reporting back about that, and then also leaving that school. I remember talking to my mom and being like, this school is sugarcoating and whitewashing everything, and I need to move beyond it. So anti-racism looks different. When I was older, when I was out of college, it was to organize protests against predatory lenders, working with Black and Latinx community members to fight unjust healthcare system, and standing up against institutions. I was very vocal and very willing to use my body and my voice to amplify the community I was living in. I was also realizing how important it is to call out institutions. And racism is not a personal thing, it's very deeply systemically institutionalized. When I got older, and even now, my anti-racism is that truth. Openly talking about power and privilege with young folks and their families, their parents, basically anyone who will engage me in that, and sharing it out and empowering others to share that out too. As a mama, I'm raising two white presenting cisgender boys, and it is having conversations with them about their whiteness so they can talk about it. You know, I got to hear a conversation between them where my youngest was like, I want to be Black Panther. And my 8-year-old was like, you can't be Black Panther, you're white. And the younger one was like, well, I am white and I can still be Black Panther. And then they started talking about blackface, and my 8-year-old was like, well, you you can't be Black, but you could still be Black Panther, but it's not okay for you to pretend like to be what you're not. And so I was really proud that they were able to have this conversation, this back and forth. And it's also like, it looks like me calling them out, calling them in when they say stuff that isn't okay. My youngest, there's a bus stop across the street, and my youngest saw it and he was like, I want to go on that bus. It's the Spanish bus, but I can't go on there. I don't speak Spanish. And I was like, what do you mean the Spanish bus? And he said, well, the people on there, they're Spanish. And so I got to call him out and I said, well, here's the thing. Some of our neighbors speak Spanish, but the city bus is for everybody. You could ride on it. I could ride on it. They could ride on it. Person down the street could ride on it. It's for everybody to ride on. And also, like, you hear somebody speaking Spanish, but that doesn't mean that they're Spanish. And so calling him out on that, and he's just like, okay. And does he call it the Spanish bus now? No, he doesn't. So it's really like, anti-racism to me is taking those moments and using them and to engage in a conversation rather than just being like, I'm not comfortable addressing that now. And it takes a lot of practice. Growing into my anti-racism has looked different. And I don't know what it's going to look like next year. I don't know what it's even going to look like tomorrow, because every situation that comes up requires me to take action, and that action could be different. And going back to pretty much everything I learned about racism, I learned in school. This is still the case for our Black and Brown Indigenous students of the global majority. They're sitting in classrooms where majority of their teachers are white, and they're having experiences. The experiences I had and the ones that I witnessed haven't changed. It's so important for us, as we become more aware, as we wake up, as we take action, to keep our students in mind and to honor them, to not just do things because we feel like it's what they need. We need to be in conversation with them all the time. If somebody had asked me when I was in 3rd grade, what do you need us to do? After hearing that my teacher like was so hateful towards my friend. If somebody had just asked me that and listened and then helped me to amplify my voice and advocate for us students, I think things would have been a lot different. I would have wanted the adults in my life to stand beside me and let me tell my story to the principal at the school. And I would have wanted some accountability. I would have wanted my 3rd grade teacher to be talked to. I would have wanted, and not me, a kid shouldn't be in that situation, but the principal can, and for a warning to go, for people to observe and see what was happening in the classroom, and if needed, for her to be removed. And she should have been removed because she was awful. But none of that happened, because we get so caught up as adults that we know what children need, and that's not okay. And one of our roles as we grow into our anti-racist self as adults is to be accountable to the young folks in our lives, because they're seeing this and they're experiencing it, and they don't have the language and the understanding to unpack it because we haven't laid it out for them, because we're willing to cultivate a world for them instead of asking them what it is that they need and what we can do for them. So growing into our anti-racist selves, I've just like, this is me processing too with you right now, but growing into our anti-racist selves requires us to not just like take action, analyze, but it requires us to listen. How can we listen to other folks? How can we amplify the voices of those who are silenced? And that's children, and folks, Black, Brown, Indigenous folks, who are often silenced and invisibilized. I'm about to close out here because I think I haven't been keeping track, and I'm sorry. So I'm going to share my screen just so you can like see how we can stay in touch, because I would love to keep this conversation going. But you can definitely stay in touch by emailing me or shouting me out on social media. I'm at Tiffany M. Jewell on Instagram and Twitter. And I really feel like I could talk about this all day long with you all. And also like being mindful of time. And please, like, again, shameless plug, but please read this book. Because what I've found is many adults have found this to be a good place to start. This book is Anti-Racist. And the other two books that I think are kind of necessary right now to go with it, Stant, Jason Reynolds, and Ibram X. Kendi. This gives you like the start, and this gives you the history, and also gives you the history to kind of understand anti-Blackness and how it was established as the norm. And then Layla Saad's book, Me and White Supremacy, is another one. If you are white, if you are light, if you are transracially adopted into a white family, if you are approximate to whiteness, read it, because it's one that will really like help you understand and do the work to understand your privilege, because we can't do this work with other folks if we don't know who we are and what our role in this work is. I also, like, here's like another thing. I'm super distracted because this is my amazing, beautiful friend, Maribel Gonzalez. She works for Amplifier Art, which is where these came from. But I love to keep her with me. I've got her at school too, because she does a lot of work on decolonizing literacy. And you can follow her on Instagram. I think it's Decolonize Literacy. And just every time she poses a question or a thought, it has me kind of thinking more deeply. And one of the things I've noticed in a lot of our justice spaces is that we don't invite Indigenous folks in, and we need to be doing that. So this is where I shout out Maribel, because decolonizing ourselves and the work that we're doing is really important to understand how we can be more inclusive, because we're not as inclusive as we think we are. And then also, like, this is where I share a resource too. These amazing posters came from, it's called Class Set. Jesselyn Alond in California like works with artists to create these, and you can get them for your classrooms. So some of the big work I do is around creating anti-racist spaces. And when you create anti-racist spaces, people should be able to see themselves reflected into their spaces. So get yourself some free art too. And with that being said, thank you for having me here. This has been a really fun conversation. Thank you for listening to my ramblings. Feel free to email me or like shout me out on Twitter if you're like, what did you mean by this? Or your thought like wasn't totally finished, because I would love to keep the conversation going. So with that being said, this is where I say thank you. And I'm going to say thank you to Chris for inviting me, and thank you to Disrupt Text. Like, oh my gosh, Lorena and Kim and Trisha and Julia. Like, I'm so blown away by the work that they've been doing, and inspired by them every day. And to be able to like share this space and this time and this day with them is like, this is me having major fangirl moments right now, but I love them so dearly. And they have done such an amazing job at amplifying and supporting so many authors of the global majority and students, that I'm so humbled to be in this space with everybody. So on that, thank you. Have an awesome rest of the day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.